Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in just a second. We'll give a few more minutes for people to get logged on. We're excited to talk to you. Go ahead and drop in the chat where you're joining us from. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. And just we'll give it another minute and then we'll get started. Thank you. Good. I don't want us to take up too much time because I know we've got a rich conversation to share with you today. Hello and welcome. My name is Marie Boone-Clark, and I'm founder of Birthing the Magic Collaborative. We are so grateful to be in community with you today. I think this is going to be a powerful conversation and a wonderful learning. We know that when Black fathers are supported, everyone benefits. Today's space is all about truth. Right? We're here to talk about fatherhood, not only as a protection, but then also as healing, as presence, as power. And before we begin, I want to share that we are recording the session. It will be available on our YouTube channel. So if you've got friends or family who aren't able to join us live, please share the link with them when we send it out. You are able, and when we invite you to drop your questions or reflections in the chat. I want to invite or introduce our dear friend, Dr. Levi Funches. So honored to work with him again. Dr. Funches is a neonatologist. He's a professor. He's a veteran, and we thank you for your service, Dr. Funches. And more than anything, he's a deeply thoughtful advocate for Black families and specifically fathers. He serves as assistant professor of clinical pediatrics at Indiana University. He works at Riley Children's Hospital, earning his medical doctorate degree from Johns Hopkins. He completed his residency in Chicago, where he is a Chicago native, anyone from Chicago there. Completed his neonatology fellowship at Washington University in St. Louis. But today he's going to talk to us not just as a clinician, but as a father, and as someone who's lived the joys, the fears, the responsibilities, all the things of Black fatherhood. So Dr. Funches, welcome, and we are here to learn from you, and I'll give you the mic.
Okay, I'm gonna get my screen shared here in a second, so bear with me, folks, because I got to get it up so I can see kind of my comments for my slides. So just bear with me 1 second. I think actually it popped
Uh,
up. I think we're ready. Okay, all right. That was quicker than I thought it would be. All right, so thank you for the introduction. I'm glad to be here again with everybody to kind of talk to you all about something that I truly am passionate about, engaging with dads and especially talk about Black fathers. So I'm going to talk today about like the importance about fathers in general, but also to talk about Black fatherhood in general, try to dispel some untruths, some nasty untruths that even still hold and has held even things I had probably heard growing up. And even now, as a father myself, still hear some of these. And I just want to kind of paint the picture around those untruths and then kind of dispel and then kind of talk about ways we as uh, folks who work in the healthcare and kind of the social service realm can kind of look at ways to include Black fathers and all fathers in general. So I have no conflicts of interest to disclose. So this kind of outline first, I kind of there'll be some. I know I talked to this group prior, so there may be a few slides you may see similar, but not a lot will be different. So I'll define a father, then I'll talk about how fathers are vital to the family health component and including them in there. Then talk about the impact of having a father, what that impact does for the family in general and the community. Then I'll focus in on Black fathers, kind of focus in on Black fathers, the uniqueness around there and the challenges and kind of ways we can look at addressing and making sure that we support Black fathers and all. And then I'll kind of conclude with what can we do to try to address to try to help with this. So first, I want to take time to define a father. Last time I spoke about this, so just to recap, father is the man is defined as the man most involved in caregiving, committed to the well-being of the child. They can be biological, foster, adoptive, can be a grandfather, uncle, stepfather. They may have legal custody or not. That's one definition I saw, and can be resident or non-resident. And today's talk, I want to discuss how we can help fathers fit into this family health dynamic, right? It's something I feel is crucial because many times in that conversation, whether it's around the medical aspect of it or research, the social aspect, the social determinants, the social sciences, a lot of times fathers are left out when we think of family health. I think we're doing better. I would say, like in the last 5 years, I've actually been impressed. I've seen a lot more discussion around dads and organization looking at ways to include dads when we're talking about family health. So, and I'll talk about the challenges and impacts of fathering, in the Black community. So, this you may have seen this, but just to recap. When fathers are involved, research showed that it benefits the dynamic of the family health from many aspects. We see fathers involved for both parents. We see the benefits of less substance use, the dad's self-confidence and image improve, parental happiness overall for both parents, stability in the marriage, as well as decrease in maternal depression. I talked last time, but when you incorporate fathers in that dynamic, the benefits you see listed for the children and better development in cognition, emotion, and social behaviors. Plus, you see improved behaviors along like the physical health and physical active stage. You see those features improve with the dad being involved. One may ask, why would we engage fathers in the family health conversation? And why we want to bring them in. In short, the answer is because they matter. Engaging with fathers around health or family health has been an aspect in medicine that's been studied. As you can see here, there's been reference looking at policy, looking at the role of fathers in development of the children, been talked about from pediatric aspect. A comment there is like almost 20 years ago, talking about the health effects of fathers being around, being understudied and unknown, and trying to improve that. But for comparison, when you think about it, when we look at studies, we see that you know, uh, fathers have been little studied in kind of like the family health background. And for comparison's sakes, one researcher, one comment on this was like for every two studies that include fathers in the family health dynamics, there's about 75 studies out there that then looks at moms' impact on their children and in the family health. So it's still some work to be done on undoing this. But knowing how fathers fit into fatherhood affects on family health is important when we look at sheer numbers. We see that there are about 121 million males aged 15 and over. 60% of those that fall in that are based off this data at that time, about like a little over 6 years ago, by our fathers. And of those, 80% of them live in some combination, live with some or all of their children. So these dads are present and should be considered when we think about overall health of the family and addressing. And if we want to consider, do fathers consider their role important? This is one study that was put out by the CDC looking at Puerto Rican fathers and seeing about these fathers over the time, like 12 months before their child was born, about half of them surveyed had healthcare visits for themselves in that 12 months. But the majority, almost 80 to 90% of them you see attended prenatal care visits, were present at the birth, and purchased infant supplies. So we feel like it shows there's potential, right? They're there, they're engaged, that we can talk with them about their health needs, the health needs of their family, and just be an aspect that we can connect with them. I think at that moment of when a man is becoming a father, it's just a moment that we may be able to grasp them and be involved. Social science and research show that a man and when it's fathering is important. At the beginning of the child's life, men had indicated from the moment they learn they're being a father, they see this as a rites of passage across many cultures. And they also have an increased sense of self. They see fatherhood almost as a status symbol across various societies, not just here, just Western societies. So what does it mean to be an involved father from the start, right? I looked at one time, like looking over the centuries here in the US, fatherhood over the centuries. was described as having these three dynamics, these three roles, where the father served probably from the end of the 18th century to early 19th century, this role of moral teacher. There was more of a focus on teaching right or wrong to their children and work ethic. And then that sort of shifted, as you can see, kind of it birthed from there also almost into like the early part of the 20th century of being a provider, right? Shifting to providing resources, support, and still that moral information to the family to now like looking more and more in the late to mid 20th century, we got more of the involved father aspect to what we're seeing more of now, where fathers are around and present, taking more on the task and roles within their child's life and their family structure, such as support and caring for the child, stay-at-home parents, attending healthcare visits, school events, etc. So it has evolved over time. And it's been important in the prenatal period, like creating this space for this father involvement, especially in light of changing concepts around these engaged fathers and present in men and family health scenarios. The maternal role is believed to be very important to the involvement of fathers. That prenatal involvement, mothers' beliefs, and play a role in that development with new fathers in their child's health at the beginning of this transition to parenthood. Having that space to create is crucial to like bringing dads into that family health dynamic in this care picture. And it's going to look different for each individual person and each individual family. One way which I like to show this is why I think this is very interesting. Research that showed this skin to skin time, which we do a lot of in the NICU, brings attention to how mothers play this can play a good role in this and encouraging dads to want to be engaged in forming that early bonding. And that they showed that with this interaction, how this correlated to a long-term closeness and connection for the child and the dad in those earlier years and lead to longer lasting benefits where they see the father's desire to be involved, the increase over time, the joy of that closeness with the infant, just having that bond with that infant, how that influences and foster that relationship to nourish for even the lifetime of that child, for just doing that skin to skin. So just that how crucial this is, like and it bolsters me to encourage fathers to do this when they're in our NICU. And then we want to create that space, right? Like, what are the things creating that space for dads? Mother's role is very key, right? More than one study, more than 90% of fathers reported they rely on their partner as their source of emotion or informational support during that perinatal period, and it emphasized support of partners for the baby's needs. And just feeling like fathers feel like it could be reciprocated, but also there's concern. Sometimes fathers feel like there may be some left out, like from in that realm where they may feel like everything's exclusively for the mom. So that's where it becomes where it's very important us those who are engaging with them, the messaging we use to try to create that space for dads to give that dynamic to change, right? And that's going to change based on geography, culture, and other aspects of the healthcare system. One study I was involved in, and we just published this recently, looking at the impact of health-seeking behaviors of men when they become fathers. In this study, about half of the men identified as white and half identified as black. But what we saw was kind of some themes commonly amongst the participants in the focus group that we did. We saw that fathers, when they looked at some things, came out around being healthy, and also on fatherhood and commitment to their partner. And one of the things that came around being healthy, fathers were likely to report focusing on their physical health. But one thing that I think that was very encouraging, and I think because of the current landscape, a lot of them talked about mental health and self-improvement and role modeling was one of some big things that came out. There was also the focus on when they looked at fatherhood as a way of supporting their partner and the baby, and there was more concern for their family than themselves. And this had little influence on how they access primary care. And what this we saw there was a desire to want to impact the outcome of the partner and the child almost at the detriment of the dad. And so this sort of emphasized, I think, like us as healthcare workers and those that's out there and engaging with families is about like trying to make sure that we're looking at ways to include our fathers from all backgrounds and making sure that we're being holistic in our care. Now, I'll talk now about fatherhood and black men. Like, what does that look like? And I know I kind of alluded to, I want to kind of present something like some myths, and these might be some things you've heard, and then try to give some little bit of nuance to the number and try to impact how we can think about it. So to start, one myth and bias and stigma that's have been mentioned about black fathers, and I've heard this from being from the moment I can remember hearing to now, that they're more times than not absent from their children's lives. And look at that census data. This is from census data probably around like about 10 years ago. 70% of non-Hispanic Black children were born to unmarried women versus like about 30% of white non-Hispanic. Now, a few journalists decided to look at this more in depth, and some of you may have seen this report to see because it's more complicated than the stereotype would suggest, especially when we look at it from a social context. One thought is like, would if only black men would marry the women they have babies with, right? This is like a very insidious suggestion, right? Something saying something might be intrinsic. Is there something intrinsically flawed in black men that make them prone to desertion and leads to like this dysfunction in the community, which is inherently false, and it's not that simple. So let's like if you consider a more in-depth look at that number, I saw this in some research, we see that about 59% of black fathers live with their children out of that number, but are simply unmarried. Men have children by more than one woman, so the father may live with some, but not all of his children. This is across different races. You can see this, but they may show as single even though there's a father in the home. We see the CDs show this so that black men are 2 times as likely as white men to have at least one child they don't live with. When you look at less than 5 years old, that's about 3 times as likely as white men to have at least one child that they're not in the home with. But there's more at play here than the concern for a perceived irresponsibility. And it's not only the sole thing at play. There's concern about social disparities affecting this number, right? Specifically looking at incarceration rates and premature deaths. When we look at this area that may be influenced by more policy than anything, we see the numbers sharply different incarceration rates, right? Looked at this data, I looked at this. This is from maybe about 8 years ago. We see that the incarceration rate for prime age black men in that age to have children is about 8.2%, compared to prime age non-black men 1.6, for black women 0.5%, and non-black women 0.2%. This correlates to about for every black woman not in jail or prison, there's about 83 incarcerated black men. And if we look at missing black men in our community, this vital age group of fathering, we see a gap of almost 1.5 million prime age black men missing in the community based off census data recently. Of that, 600, about half of that number is due to the higher imprisonment rate. And almost one, we see about 1 in 12 men in this group are behind bars versus 1 in 60 for non-black men in that age group, 1 in 200 black women, and 1 in 500 non-black women. Homicide rates counted for almost up to 200,000 missing black men from that number in the community. And many other causes of deaths, right? Accidents, respiratory disease, for example, are more common among black boys and men than black girls and women or white girls and white women. Here are some of those stats, right? You may have seen this, right? Shorter lifespan, like living 6, 7 years less, black men are. Higher death rates in all the leading causes of deaths. 40% dying prematurely from heart disease compared to 21% for white men. 40% of black men considered overweight. Looking at whatever you may see, this data you might look, about 25 to 40% are obese. Black men are 5 more times likely to die if they contract the HIV virus. Higher suicide rates, especially when you look at the younger age group of black men, it's about the third leading cause. Time when I looked at this data. Higher incidence and rate of death from stomach cancer, and higher incidence of diabetes and prostate cancer. So we see that. There was one researcher like who looked at this at the Brookings Metro, took a deeper dive at this, looking at the effects that this have on those the most marginalized in our society here in the States, including African American and Native Americans. And she saw that boys who grew up in families in that bottom lower income distribution, they had almost a 20 times more likely to be in prison on a given day in their early 30s than those born in the top 10%. Those who are prisoners are disproportionately likely to have grown up in socially isolated and segregated neighborhoods, high rates of child poverty, and unfortunately those predominantly in African American and American Indian neighborhoods. So one of the conclusions from this author was that to be male, poor, and African American is to confront daily basis deeply held racism that exists in many, if not every social institution. And I'll get a little bit more into that later in the presentation on like how that affects how Black men and people in the Black community access healthcare and how we need to look at ways to try to mitigate that. And I think work with the entire family to try to address that in our communities. So she bitching when it's socially acceptable to equate two demographic groups with criminality and danger, it's acceptable to limit hiring practice for African American, Native American males. They get blocked off in neighborhoods when these groups who are marginalized are looked at as being part of a criminal element, and they get deprived of certain areas of services and resources. And this feeds into some hesitance from them to see how these social ills feeds into how they access healthcare and hindrance for caring for themselves for these two groups, specifically Black men for our discussion. But you also lose a vital partner in your community that could encourage healthy habits and usage of the available healthcare resources for those in their family, right? And in their circle. So now I'll go back to that slide and hopefully now you see this number in a different context, right? With it being like most things complex and intricate, right? Now, even with all of that, there's something I want to emphasize that was seen about Black fathers from research work done that has held actually probably for like, I know the first of it was probably about 10 years ago, but I think recent looked at it still show it holds. This mythology of Black male dereliction is false because when you look at it in more in depth, you see a different play on Black fatherhood. There's data that Black parents are less likely to marry before a child is born, but it's not true that Black fathers suffer a pathology of neglect. A CDC report found that Black fathers were the most involved with their children daily on a number of measures versus any other fathers, right? They're more likely to, those who live with their children, most likely to bathe, dress, change, help with toilet training compared to the white and Hispanic counterparts. They're more likely to have eaten a meal with their child and more likely to take their children to school and activities that the kids involved in. And in many cases, this was among fathers who didn't live with their children, as well as those who did. So if this is not encouraged or emphasized, right, over the myths and the misconceptions and the ill treatments, it can have a detrimental effect on the psyche and actions of Black fathers. Hence why discussing the importance of fathers, in particular Black fatherhood, holistically is important and crucial to the health of Black men and the Black family. And like I say, this still holds true. This recent data, we still see looking at fatherhood and Black fathers, just we need to have better messaging, right? To help dispel some of these myths that still persist about us as Black fathers and can bring Black men and fathers back into our communities to help find and nurture solutions that affect mothers, infants, and fathers, right? Such things as maternal mortality, infant mortality, which is what I focus a lot of my work on here at Indiana University, but also maternal, paternal, postpartum depression, and access to a lot of things that are lacking in the community that affects social determinants. These numbers of involved fathers is high, and not just for biological fathers living inside the home. It's indicating that Black fathers often step into roles of step parents or maintain consistent involvement when living outside the homes. This involvement, it can, they step into roles as uncles, big brothers, stepping in these roles to serve these father figure roles. And this involved important for many reasons, right? It's why this data show that children would involve fathers and father figures. They're lower risk of developing disruptive behavior, mental health difficulties, as well as they have academic success and physical health positivity. So portraying Black fathers in their true light, which data supports, is important because the nuances can be missed when the father of a Black family is portrayed as either absent or just not a very good dad, right? And that message is all that is shared. It's not looking at it at a more granular level, as well as it leads to this misconception and thought that one narrative applies to every Black family everywhere. Given the history of racism in the US, some Black fathers may face disproportionate incarceration rates, have difficulty obtaining jobs to provide for their families, but these hardships are only part of the story of Black fatherhood. And sharing information that is more informative, such as what is shared on the Black American Dad Foundation, as well as information from the National Fatherhood Institute, which emphasize showing children the successes and failures of Black fathers and emphasizing fathers not being afraid to show their vulnerable side to their children, as well as understanding the data behind the number. And I like to always just recall, even myself, when I look at these numbers, have to remind myself, just recall when we're talking about numbers and stats, they're not numbers and stats. We actually are talking about actual people. And those people have feelings and they are important to somebody. One area to worry about is mistrust in the community about the medical world. We can see how social problems and misconceptions can feed into mistrust of the healthcare system. There was a group out of Connecticut that looked at medical mistrust and the effects on delay in seeking healthcare amongst Black men. They surveyed about 600 African American men aged 20 and older from barbershops across the U.S., and their work showed that for African American men, there were a high mistrust in the medical healthcare system. They would have decreased care satisfaction, decreased treatment adherence, and decreased utilization of those health services. As far back as 2010, it's been shown that the medical mistrust leads to delay in getting care and seeking delay in routine care, blood pressure screening, auto screening checks. And this can translate down to your partner and how they access care plus care for the child. The effects of racism on this lack of trust of the healthcare system can be seen in perspectives by how everyday racism affects the daily life of someone. With everyday racism practices showing as being followed around stores, treated suspiciously, the stop and frisk can lead not to just mistrust in society, but feeds mistrust of the healthcare and those social care systems that are present in the community and the country. And this experience was commonly reported by African American men and Black women, not to mention the stress and how the body responds to stress. So everyday racism powerfully correlates to medical mistrust amongst Black men and may heighten their perception of racism in healthcare settings. This can accumulate and transfer into their healthcare interactions, reinforce expectation of racially discriminatory clinical counters where they're going in and not thinking positively about their experience, and heighten known poor medical treatments, right, of Black and minoritized groups, such as what happened to Henrietta Lacks and her family, the Tuskegee experiment, and this can lead to the concept of perceived racism in healthcare, right? Which is this perception that individuals are treated differently because of their race by healthcare professionals. That same group out of Connecticut, they saw that this medical mistrust manifested and broke down such that you saw delays in the least invasive types of preventive health screening, blood pressure, and that perceived racism in healthcare was most associated with delayed in getting cholesterol screening, right? So this was seen as more invasive. And there was heightened concern amongst Black men that their race would have them treated differently in the interactions with the system and how their sample would be handled, leading to this delay in seeking services. We also see the medical mistrust and how this could affect Black maternal outcomes, right? Black women have reported more likely to experience bias and discriminatory healthcare treatment during pregnancy and childbirth. The structural inequalities that exist, inequities and limited access to facilities in the neighborhoods where they are, transportation, financial resources can lead to mistrust and reluctance. And this one breaks my heart, the fear of judgment and stigma for choices and health conditions, just being judged by their appearance or just something they may have made. Not people looking into like why those decisions was made, why they may not have filled the prescription, as instead of being curious, being judgmental and that can lead to hindrance in them engaging with healthcare workers. And that worry and concern that this mistrust, compounded by mistrust of Black fathers, can impact how the system is accessed by Black families, in particular prenatal care. And that care is important, right, to limiting premature births, which contribute to the risk of infant mortality and morbidities for the baby. Now, I'll talk now about what can we do, right, to address this? What can be done? How to include Black fathers, right? What are some ways we in healthcare, working for organizations that are engaging with the family, engaging with the community, trying to impact those social determinants, trying to impact the healthcare individuals? How can we include Black dads in this, right? I think first question I would say is ask, is your space welcoming, right? A father embracing environment, right? The father feels welcomed, valued, and respected, right? You want to promote the well-being and development of fathers and their family. You want to convey that message to the father, the Black fathers, that they are important, right? What do they see when they look in your space, right? When they enter the space, you want to create an area where there's interest in reading material for the Black father or just any father. The what how are fathers portrayed in photographs and posters around your office space? You know, do you have the color scheme furniture that would probably fit a larger frame, fit the frame of the father? Just to think about those things. You know, creating parent leader programs, right? This can be very helpful, right? Using one if it exists to ensure an environment that invite fathers in to engage and interact with their children and other parents and staff, just doing those things for black fathers and those in your community that you serve. I think I shared this comment, right? I think last time, this was from an early Head Start program in Kentucky. One father mentioned about not having a diaper changing table in their restroom, right? And it's just, it's just to think about what message does this send to, that father, right? To men in that using that facility about like how this organization, this Head Start was thinking about their role in their child's life. You know, if you're doing an engagement event, men tend to like, hands-on kind of in direct learning, kind of direct. That tends to be learning style that favors men. So trying to modify your space if you're doing like engagement events, setting it up so there's conversations or ways they can meet. So like conference style sitting at a long table as opposed to like audience sitting, so that they're sitting across from and next to each other to lead to that engagement. Or having a U-shaped setup where a presenter can be in front or middle or even sitting amongst the fathers can be a way to kind of help with those engagement events. You know, we're up against a lot of obstacles that may come, but I think, this speaks to the resilience of the man that they show up to areas either when they're called or feel like they're not normally going to be engaged after all that's stacked against them. And they may come angry and frustrated, right? Just knowing they may come angry, frustrated, and afraid. But sometimes I tell this to the residents I work with is that, sometimes when a family's having like a what we may perceive as an outburst of anger, just know that that may be a way that they're trying to protect themselves from pain and fear that they're having. And so that's just maybe an outward frustration from what's going on and sometimes from the social system failing them. So what are ways we can address this, right? We can try to be consistent in expressing a preference for the men to be at each meeting and asking about them when they're not there. Um, and asking them how they're doing when they are there, right? And encouraging their presence, right? And emphasizing to all family members how the baby benefits from both parents, right? Just doing that in your outreach material, looking at how it's expressed about the importance of both parents for the child, just having those things there. Make it a priority to communicate with them and affirm their roles in their child's life, right? Try to say ways to convey welcoming messages to the black father is, look at trying to make meetings with fathers as available to when they're available to participate. This may call on you doing some weekends and some night hours, right? Potentially, as you're able to, if it's possible. You don't have to do it every day, but maybe one day a week. Include fathers in all the family engagement and opportunity activities and engage with them in conversations about their child when they're there, right? Talk to them. Acknowledge them as nurturers. Recognize their parenting style, even if it's different from the mom. Ask them like, what are things that how do they handle certain situations with the baby? How do they handle a temper tantrum? How do they handle when the baby doesn't want to eat a certain food? What have they observed about their child? What do they see how the child's doing in class? These are ways to like convey a welcoming message to bring them in because I really feel this is an aspect that's missing that I think will help us engage fully with our communities and get feedback from the fathers, right? What can be important, what can be improved, what makes them feel welcome. And then I think having open conversation with your staff and your supervisors and folks that's going to work with them and encouraging them to have self-reflection and explore their hidden assumptions and biases about working with Black fathers. Have them look at that and engage reciprocally, right? Fathers are more likely to engage with caregivers if the environment shows it values them and the caretakers of their children. And it's important in all aspects of the interaction. Very important, especially in that introductory visit, right? First impressions. So at that prenatal visit, engaging with the Black dad when he's there reciprocally. All practice personnel, including nursing staff, should engage with fathers in the visit. This is important if they accompany the mother. And another way to ensure importance is ensuring communication of both parents. So sharing written communications, especially in the settings of divorce or separations where there may be two homes, and inquiring about that and seeing ways to help with that. Advise fathers start early, right? Like I showed with that skin time and participate in and feedings, because that there's been shown that close contact in the early infancy leads to prolonged um, interactions for the dad in their child's life. Leads It correlates to long term whether the dad and mom stay together. If the dad's in the home, stay in the home or not in the home, it leads to longer term starting that first connection. It's important to get it started as early as possible, soon to soon. The research is showing it. And again, sharing written communications and resources to help with the knowledge and help find father-centric work. Encouraging your clinicians to look at that work, right? And talking with when the mom's there about supporting the dad as well. And stressing the dad that fathers often serve as role models for the children, right? So encouraging fathers to model healthy behaviors, right? I think I saw that in our project is that a lot of dads was talking one day. I do definitely recall one dad from our focus group emphasizing how he was moving to quit smoking because now he was a new dad. I think when we think about just knowing diversity of fathers, right? I know here, and I'm sure various communities are immigrant population, those who found come from the African diaspora, from Black families. It's like understanding, like trying to like how it's important how much just how uh, um, speaking to folks, even if it's just a greeting in their language and trying to learn it, can actually have a huge impact on making someone feel welcome. And so thinking about again, like what do they see? Having various languages of and signs and labels in English and other home languages for the communities you serve. Try to tailor programs as you can to different ages and experience, knowing that family structures can be different. Some family structures may have where the grandparents are involved. And again, knowing that some that fathers may again live with just some of their children, not all of them. Some dads can be single parents as well, and just knowing, like, just trying to know that these dads are going to come diverse, just like the different aspects with the moms, and just being aware on that, and just knowing ways to kind of engage with them as well, like you do, like you think about it with the mom. And understanding father circumstances can be different and respect that each can be unique, right? Knowing that the Black father's own negative experience growing up can influence how they interact with the healthcare system and interact with child rearing. And so knowing this and what resources you have available in your community can help mitigate this. Seeking out help if you don't know if no one in your group or organization knows how to handle or deal with that, seeking out help and trying to ask around, asking for the help, knowing that they may be unresolved conflict between parents that can exist, and working with your social support to get the training, the skills on how to navigate that as well. Peer-to-peer support can be crucial in those scenarios. And if you're able to create programming, great. Or if you have one that exists to grow from it. And also, I think here, like phone a friend, there might be neighboring organizations around you that are doing things like that peer-to-peer, and just may need to just think about ways they can expand to include fathers into those. And build programming, like I kind of talked about this, as like based on fathers and their strength, right? Men, build programs around Black fathers from a strength-based approach, curriculum like from a strength-based approach for men's learning styles, more hand-on, visually engaging, non-threatening discussion, making it a safe space, interactive, and bringing fathers together to connect with each other and staff, right? Setting goals, setting their engagement outcomes. If you can build some programming, this can be very crucial and helping the fathers learn from each other, build on ideas and beliefs and parenting priorities, right? I saw like peer support was key and can be key in a father's journey too, with a few noted differences. One study saw that new fathers drew support from families. This is contrast where moms typically draw support from friends. However, family and community support still limited, and culture can play a role in the support that fathers receive, right? A lot of evidence and benefits of peer support from women and new mothers, but there's not as much on new dads. So there's still more work to be done on this. But fathers have mentioned benefits of talking with men, in particular Black men have mentioned talking with Black men about their experience in general is beneficial. So trying to create opportunities to engage with the men, either within parenting groups, social media support, text messaging, however you may be able to like try to coordinate to create a space where they can connect with folks. Looking at your local barbershops or places where black men congregate and working with them to see ways to try to create a space where you can create this conversation. Studies have shown, peer support for men and male groups, but an alternative, fathers have a preference for this support to be outside of kind of like the prenatal kind of focus group. They kind of would prefer like more normative setting, male normative settings, if you want to call it that, such as like bar, pub, gym, sports clubs, indicating support groups outside of a hospital setting can be very beneficial and demonstrated variety may be key, and no one solution is going to fit every solution or father, right? And so I'll kind of just conclude with that because I think like so we can get in and maybe some conversation and see what I can help with. It's like things to kind of work on is just prioritize, right? Again, showing Black fathers that they matter, mitigating your assumptions about them, just like with any group. I would say it's just, be curious. Don't just assume. Think outside the box on family engagement work. Try to think about other ways to try to engage. I think like, if you have, clinic hours, things like that, like trying to think more, one weekend, I don't know, a month, one weekend every 2 months, like trying to offer those options. That way, maybe there'll be ways that the men and the fathers can be able to come. Listen and acknowledge their concerns when they're voiced, right? We want to make them feel like they're heard. And sometimes you may not always have an answer for what they share, but you can at least say you hear them and you appreciate them sharing and you will look into and see what you can do. Look at what you're sharing and how men are reflected in particular, how black men are reflected in it. Is it in a positive light? Encouraging health-seeking behaviors, right? Encouraging them to do healthy behaviors and how they can link that to fatherhood and the impact that can have on their child long term. I didn't talk much on this, but screening for paternal postpartum depression in men is very key and just keep learning. I mean, there's a lot. Like I say, in the last 5 years, I've seen more coming out about supporting dads and supporting men when we think about the family health dynamic. And I think it's just something that I think it's something in our communities that's little utilized and has been kind of I want to say maybe not disregarded, but just not looked at as intently as some other areas. And I think we need to just start bringing men and bringing fathers back into it. And I think talking with them, engaging with them, you start to see people are open and engaging once they know you're truly showing that you care and truly are dedicated to the work. So with that, I thank you all for taking time to listen to me, and I can stop sharing my screen and see uh, what conversation, see where we're going, where you want to go to next. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Funches. That was amazingly rich. And so we're going to take questions from our audience. I always feel like Oprah when I say that. Um, we're going to open the floor for questions. So please drop them in the chat. And while we're waiting, I have a ton. One of the things that you brought up or that you mentioned from that Brookings report or research was it talked about the disinvestment in Black men, right? And the access to education, employment, healthcare. There was a list, and yet you also pointed out that many Black dads still show up. So my question is twofold. One is, given this experience and in your experience, how have you seen Black fathers push through these barriers? How do they get past all these things that can affect their ability to show up? Right. And then the second, and I think more important question would be for those of us who are in the system or in the community, what would it look like for the systems to truly support dads, whether it's emotionally, physically, practically? So two questions. One, what have you seen fathers do, or what do you think some of the keys that they've employed first to get past some of the things that may affect their ability to father well? And then the second part is what can we do as a community to support them?
I think what helps them, what I've seen, like the men who want to engage with the work we're doing here in Indianapolis and what I've seen around, is like I think it's going where they are. I think in order to kind of form that relationship with them if you can find somebody within the community, it may be somebody who's already a community organizer, a community-based organization that exists. We have one here called Fathers and Family Center that's been here probably since I want to say early 2000s, if not the late 90s, that's have been in existence. And if you can find that, I think like when you 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 can form that connection, and if you can go kind of to their place and not set up something and have and ask them to come where you are, you kind of can make that initial move. I what I have seen is that they want to engage. They want to know how to be better fathers, better people. I think like in general, and this may be me quoting my dad. My dad always say most for the most part, people are good people, right? And so
Right.
I think most folks, and there may be challenges, but I think when you kind of get to it and try to, and you're not judging them, they tend to feel like okay, they want to try to do the right thing, whether they have whatever that hiccup may be. And I
Mhm.
tend to see like that tends to be like when you go in and and you're genuine want to help them. You want to we share information about okay, this is how you can be an advocate. You teach them some skills about an advocate for safe sleep. That's like what I really do, big engagement with men around safe sleep. And when I kind of talk to them about it, and then I say, okay, well, what's your thoughts on it? And I kind of listen and hear what they say. I think they feel respected and heard because I mean you can come and yeah I'm Dr. Funches, Dr. Lee, whatever, but I'm actually I want to listen and hear from them and hear what they think in their community is going to help. I see that that tends to be the best way to try to engage in that way. The second question, sorry, I lost track. I lost track.
You know what? I think you answered both
Okay,
beautifully.
I want to make sure I get you what you want.
And for those who did not get a chance to attend Dr. Funch's workshop on dads and safe sleep, it's on our YouTube channel. But there's a question in the group that I think is a really good one. Um, I have a men's group. How can I get new fathers, single fathers, or even fathers that aren't active in the child's life? Where and how can our group reach out to them?
Hmm. Well, I think like again, I think like if you can find if there's any kind of men support, if you're it, there's nothing else supporting them like in the area. I think you can try to see if there's any social work organizations that kind of trying to help men that it may be coming back or trying to like go back to school. You can see like those are places, programs to try to look out and maybe look and see if there are dads there. The schools sometimes can help. Like you can reach out to the schools and see if that's a way. I think there's places where we've been able to try to connect with fathers that's looking for some help and support, like looking at the school districts. I think the way we narrowed our focus is we looked at our zip code data for infant mortality rates. And then we looked at those schools and went to those schools and tried to share our information when we do outreach about ways that we're connecting with dads. I'm learning with this generation, and I'll tell you this, is that paper flyers are not the way they want stuff like on their phone, digital, they want videos.
Uh,
So that's like tends to be something that works. And what I'm learning here too, for our immigrant population, even if you get something translated, there's still the risk that some of them might not be able to read it. And so I'm learning like I know here for our Haitian Creole family, one of our Haitian Association members had mentioned that videos are more effective because even if you translate something and give it to them, they may not be able to read it. They still have to read it for them. And so that's one of the things that we're trying to work on is how to adjust to that. So hopefully that's one areas that can help. Child care centers. I think it's just thinking out the box, like thinking of like where the families are. Gyms, barbershops. I've been to barbershops, going there and just continuing to come. We do Indianapolis. There's a couple groups that do barbershop health initiatives at different barbershops. And I've been
mhm.
in there with a crib with a baby doll sitting in there, big tall. I'm like 6'9". Y'all can't tell, but 6'9", black man sitting there with a doll in a barbershop and I they look and you go to them and you talk to them and then when I do that, you kind of talk to them about the issue and and what you're doing and why. I think when they hear and you give them the information and say how it's really impacting our community, which I don't want, I know Indiana's data and some other cities, but hate to say, like, unfortunately, infant mortality rates, maternal mortality rates follows a lot of long um, social lacking, and unfortunately, it does affect the Black communities negatively. And so we see that, and so I think when you share that with them, they want to engage and figure out ways, and they sometimes come to you and tell you ways that where they think the information will be most useful too, and it's been effective. Like some, I think, learning of some youth athletic leagues that we've gone and talked to. I learned from that from a father that we engaged with at one of our outreach events at a police athletic league we did. So hopefully that helped.
Thank you. You guys keep dropping the questions in the chat. One that occurred also as you were giving your talk, Dr. Funches, for me is rarely do we talk about the grief, the guilt, the
Mhm.
helplessness that Black fathers carry after a complicated or traumatic birth. Um, in your experience, one, how do Black men tend to hold that pain? And I think you touched on it a little bit when you mentioned that sometimes what we would describe it, in a business setting or a hospital setting as someone acting out is really something else. But so how do you see Black men holding pain? And then how can we make room for it? How can we acknowledge that what we may see as aggressive behavior is someone who is struggling with the situation?
Yeah. I think one, what I you what well the pain manifests in that kind of like this the I guess whether depression or just kind of the stress from it or whatever, it can manifest different ways for different people. Sometimes it can manifest like the standard definition of depression, but a lot of times you see, men, I think there's talking about the male kind of depressive framework where they may manifest in other ways, such as almost like I don't want, I think the word, like a better term, like overcompensating, where in a way they may overwork. Some of them engage in substance use. Some might engage in womanizing. Some might engage, like I say, they engage in like trying to push through and go to work, and sometimes it can manifest that way, the stress. And so it's yeah, we got to get better screening tools. There's a social worker I'm working with here. He has one that he's trying to design ways to like screen better, and he focuses in actually on Black fathers and Black men in general about how they're dealing with depression. Just trying to get better screening tools, because some of the ones we have out there, they typically focus in more so on the traditional definitions of depression, but there are like these other symptoms that men, just from a masculine framework, kind of that thoughts of you can't show weakness, right? It's still that we're better. I say we are better about not necessarily permeating that, but it still somewhat lingers in there. And it's like trying to make sure that, showing that or showing that you need help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. And it's just trying to change that message. So I think um the ways to kind of help with that is like trying to, is looking that if there's concerns there, talking with them, and I think spreading messages and letting folks know how it can manifest and how it can present differently in men, and helping folks look for those signs.
Mm.
Again, it's like you don't want to necessarily force someone or try to um try to make them experience trauma again or say they're having it, but it's just like just I think just sharing that information, talking with it and spreading the message and continuing to share it, and just saying, I think, like how it can present in different ways, especially sometimes for men it can present more like I don't want they can present aggressive, I guess, in this instance sometimes, that when they're experiencing from that loss. And I think also one thing that correlates, and this probably I think will you probably will hear some of this message, especially with paternal depression day coming up, is that a lot of times one of the highest risk factors for a man to experience postpartum is a mom experiencing it. And so if a mom experience, you have a higher risk for as a man to actually be experiencing and could have postpartum depression. And so I think it's again just making raising awareness amongst providers or people who providing a service, but also just amongst the community of finding those signs.
That's an interesting point. I've not heard that before, Dr. Funch. It's that almost to the extent if I'm a practitioner and I know that mom is experiencing postpartum depression, I should almost automatically encourage dad to be screened. Or that's an aha moment for at least me. What strategies could be used to encourage more expectant dads to join antenatal courses, particularly those that are delivered in hospital? Who are the key people who see families that can encourage the dads to take part?
Yeah. I think it's like grabbing them when they're there, engaging with them from the beginning, asking about, who's the mom support person, who and where's dad is when you can. Trying to figure out a way to connect with that dad. I think I got this from another group someone else I worked with on some I sat on a panel with them, and one thing she brought up is that you can get into sometimes there can be this gatekeeping where they can portray and say dad doesn't want to be involved, dad doesn't want to be involved, and now it sort of makes me like when I hear that to try to think deeper and try to find out more information, see the connect. And then what she says she has found is that when that happens and you see that, she tends to find like when she engaged with the dad, it's not like the dad doesn't want to be involved, they want him to be involved the way they want him to be involved, and then it leads to conflicts. And so I think is ways to try to like look at ways to try to figure out how to connect with dad. And then if he's definitely there, encouraging him to come to the courses, and what are the benefits of it. I think as I kind of alluded to, sometimes, there is showing that dads like those courses, but they do some dads, there is a certain percentage that want to have that course somewhat in a, I guess, a male derived setting. So kids, you go to a local gym and maybe potentially set something up that could be like an intake for bringing them into antenatal courses, like saying, hey, guy, are you expecting a baby? Well, do you want to come and learn about ways that you can help, or ways your local clinic can help you get the best prenatal care for the mother, right? And so it may just be coming in those and sort of pulling them out of kind of the traditional prenatal course, bringing them to the gym. I know it mentioned in the research, I saw the pub and the bar, but I guess it seems like to me, I'm like, I guess I could see it working. I guess if you go to a certain spot there, but it could. But I think like gym, sports leagues, I know are an interesting one. I think that could work too. Ways to kind of do it. Kids sports leagues could be an option too, because there's a lot of times, especially in no basketball, a lot of times you're gonna have the father there rooting on the child, and so just seeing if there's a way to grab their attention and see if you can encourage them to, seek those courses for their partner and for their family.
And I think those are all wonderful suggestions. And you pinged my mind because it's like, oh, um, going to a gym or even including in mom's first visit that there are antenatal programs for that she and dad should take. But then something one of our board members, he's always telling me like that is not language that normal people say. I think he may be on this call, so I'm gonna quote you, David. Calling it an antenatal class, right? Should we not use language that the average person will use? And so maybe saying, prepping for fatherhood, what you need to know, or protecting your family, or tools for protecting your family, but using affirming language that's not so sciency. And then also being able to center the dad's role, because we know, and rightly so, mom is and should be our primary focus. So the mindset may simply be, there's nothing here for me. I'm just supposed to stand on the side. And you think about the images that we see on television, right? The dad is at the head of the bed, and they don't see that he's supposed to be engaged in her labor. It just seems like he's supposed to be there with like a video camera or whatever. And then my own experience, I know my son-in-law is an attorney, And the classes that were offered at the hospital were like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so he and my daughter ended up having to do a class that was across town. And when I say across town, we're talking Manhattan, but they had to find a class that was offered at 7 o'clock at night or 7:30 for, someone with his schedule. And someone suggested churches,
Yeah,
not to
I
leave
was gonna say that. I saw that. That's
faith-based
that's true. I mean,
institution.
we
Yeah.
definitely with our churches, like I mentioned about like for our infant mortality work with dads, we look at our hardest, our zip codes, and usually one of the places I look at, not just the barbershops or the schools, is we usually look at the churches that's there because of many of them um have connections in their community. They know what I tend to find out is sometimes it may not be that institution or that person, but a lot of times they know somebody who can
Mhm.
be that person that can be that person for that neighborhood. And some
Right.
neighborhoods it will be the church and it will be the pastor, but some neighborhoods it might be the pastor who has done projects with another worker, or they know that there's somebody who uses their gym for youth engagement that they know has a connection with the fathers and the men in the community. And so yeah, I mean the churches are definitely can't leave them out there. The churches are definitely important, especially in the Black community. And I think in the Hispanic and Asian community, they serve a huge role for the people.
Mhm. Certainly play a vital part. Dr. Funches, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. To everyone who's with us that joined us this afternoon, thank you for watching. Thank you for showing up and engaging. Before we close, I have to remind you that July, we have Black Maternal Mental Health Week. It's just around the corner. And we're going to bring real talk with some wonderful speakers like we always have with people like Dr. Funches. We're going to talk about joy. We're going to talk about grief. We're going to talk about healing. So many things. We will have a workshop or two for dads, and we're going to um, what do they say? All the layered, messy, beautiful emotions that come with becoming a parent. And of course, it will be free. We'll have the schedule up next week. So save the date now. It's July 19th through the 24th-ish. But follow us on social media. And I would be remiss if I did not remind you that we are still doing our collab with Stoop and Steak. And I'm not sitting high enough today for you to see our teeny little shirt, but we have beautiful shirts with an organization called Stoop and Steak. And they make, what do they say? They're for the culture and specifically for birthing the magic. We have these amazing t-shirts. We have a hoodie for you. Uh, Dr. Funches, and you said you were 6'9". My brother's like 6'5", 6'6", and the hoodie fit him. And so we're going to expect you to get you a hoodie and post it on social media and tag us. I'll drop the link in our chat. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, Dr. Funches. Good luck with dropping your son off.
Thank you all for having me. Appreciate it.